Hi there, I'm Wendy, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this beginner's level crochet flower. I'm using a couple of different shades of double knitting yarn. I've got a 4mm crochet hook, and I've also got a small pair of scissors and a needle at hand to sew in my ends afterwards. I'll be taking you through everything clearly step by step, but should you need a little more info, I'll put a couple of links in the description box below and a link in here above now that will take you to my absolute beginners video that shows you in depth everything from making a slip knot to how to hold the yarn and how to hold the hook. So for now, I'll bring the overhead camera in and we'll get going making this little flower. Just before we start, this is the right-handed video, so if you're left-handed, I'll put a link in above here now and in the description box below to take you to the left-handed video. So to make the flower, we're going to work this center section here, which is in yellow on this flower, and we're going to make it in green this time, and it's going to look exactly like this. So the first thing that I want to do is make a slip knot to go on my crochet hook. So I'm going to lay my yarn across my fingers with the end of the yarn here running along the outside edge of my little finger, and that's called the tail end. I'm then going to hold the yarn in place with my thumb, and I'm going to wrap the yarn around my first two fingers and form a cross with it. Okay, and then I'm going to hold that in place with my thumb, and then I'm going to wrap it around again lower down, and again hold it in place with my thumb. So I've made two loops. I've got the first loop I made is the upper loop, and the second loop I made is the lower loop. So then I'm going to take my crochet hook and pop that underneath the top loop and grab the second loop and pull it through, and then I can gradually take that off my fingers. But as I do that, I want to hold these two ends here, and then I gently pull, and that's given me the slip knot, which is the flexible loop that will sit on my hook. Now, there's lots of ways of making a slip knot, and if you need to see this in more depth, I'm going to put a link up here now to my video that shows you how to make a slip knot and chain so that you can just check through with it. So the next thing we're going to do is make 6 chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my forefinger on top of the stitch on the hook, and I've got my hook looking at me as if it was a toothbrush, and I'm just supporting that stitch about I'd say 1.5 centimeters to 2 centimeters away from the tip of the hook. I don't want it down here in the tight part of the throat. I want the stitches to be able to slide up and down on the shoulder of my hook. So I've got my finger on top of the hook, and I've got my yarn going across the fingers of my other hand, and then I'm going to use this hand to gently hold the yarn, and then it means that sometimes I can release my forefinger and thumb so that I can do things like hold the bottom of the stitch on the hook, and I'm still controlling the yarn through my fingers. So we're going to make 6 chain. So I'm going to keep my finger on top of that hook to stop the stitch from spinning around, and I'm going to take the yarn up the back, over the top and down the front of the hook, and that's called a yarn over. So I'll do that again. Stitch comes up the back, over the top and down the front of the hook. Then, still holding the yarn in my hand, I can just let go with my thumb and forefinger and hold the stitch on the bottom of the hook. So now I've got my forefinger on the top of the stitch and my other thumb and forefinger holding the bottom of the stitch. So now I can take my forefinger off the hook, and I can turn my hook downwards and scoop it back through, catching the yarn with it, and I've made 1 chain. So I'm going to put my forefinger back on that stitch on the hook. I can let go with the other hand, and I'm going to take my yarn up the back, over the top, down the front, which is the yarn over movement, and then I can let go with my thumb and my forefinger, still holding the yarn in the bottom 3 fingers. Hold the stitch underneath the hook. Let go with the forefinger that was supporting the stitch, and then I can turn my hook downwards, catching the yarn and pulling it through. So that's 2 chain. So forefinger goes on top of the hook, bringing the yarn up and over again, turning the hook downwards and pulling through. And I've made 3 stitches on my hook. Bring the yarn up and over, turn the hook down and scoop through, and I've made 4. Finger on the top to stop the stitch from spinning, bringing the yarn up and over and down the front. Hold the chain underneath the hook, let go with my forefinger, turn that hook down and scoop back through. Going to do it once more for you. Finger on the hook, yarn over, hold the chain underneath the hook, and then I can turn that hook downwards and scoop it back through. So I'm now going to count my chain. I've got the little slip knot I made here at the bottom, and then I'm going to look at these V's. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I don't count the chain that's on the hook. So now I'm going to turn this into a circle so that I can crochet into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've got the yarn at the back, and then I'm going to pick up this chain, and I'm going to put my hook from front to back through the first chain I made through one side of it. So I just pop my hook through, and when I look at it now, it looks like I've got a U shape sitting on my hook. So now I'm going to bring my yarn in that yarn over movement, which is bringing the yarn up the back, over the top and down the front. And then I'm going to hold this U shape that's underneath my hook and turn my hook downwards and scoop back, bringing the yarn with it. And I've now made a loop. So if we look at it, we can see that we've got this loop that's connected with this stitch that we just made, and that's called a slip stitch, and it's formed a ring. So we're going to be working into this ring, and that's going to be making the 1 round of double crochet stitches that we're making. So the next step is to make 1 chain. So I want you to take the yarn up and over and to the back of my work. You don't leave the yarn at the front here, you always take the yarn to the back. And then I can take my hook and I can turn it downwards, catching the yarn and scooping it back through, and I've made my 1 chain. So now I'm going to make my stitches into the center of this hole. So I'm going to keep my yarn to the back of my work, and I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to pop it through the center of that hole. I'm then going to make the yarn over movement, and it will feel a little bit strange. So although it's bringing the yarn up over the top and down the front, it sort of flops into position, but that is right. And then I'm going to catch the yarn in the hook and bring the hook back through to the front. And I've got 2 stitches on my hook. I'm now going to take the yarn over again, so it comes up the back, over the top, down the front and to the back of my work, and then turn that hook downwards. And if I give just a little pull on this ring, it just opens up the stitches a little bit more. That helps you to pull the hook back through. So I'm just going to pull slightly, turn my hook downwards and scoop it back through, and that's 1 stitch made. That's 1 double crochet. So we're going to do this again. So I'm going to take my hook from front to back through the ring. The yarn is going to make the yarn over movement, which is really bringing the yarn up over the back, over the top and down the front. Yarn always stays at the back of your work. Then pull the hook back through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook. Now I'm going to do the yarn over again, up the back, over the top, down the front to the back of my work, and then turn that hook downwards, just a tiny bit of a pull on this ring to open up the hole, and you can just scoop back through. And that's 2 stitches made. So to work it again, the hook goes from front to back through the ring. The yarn comes up the back, over the top and down the front of the hook, making that yarn over movement. And then I draw the hook back through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook. The yarn comes up the back, over the top, down the front and to the back of my work. And then I can turn my hook downwards and I can scoop back, bringing the yarn with me. And I now have made 3 double crochet. So once more, the hook goes from front to back through the ring. I make that yarn over movement, so the yarn has come over the front of the hook. I then draw the hook back through and I have 2 stitches on my hook. I then make that yarn over movement again and take my yarn to the back of my work, and then turn my hook downwards and scoop back through, bringing the yarn with me. And again, the hook goes from front to back through the ring. I make a yarn over and then I draw the hook back through to the front, and I have 2 stitches on my hook. I then make the yarn over movement again, making sure I take my yarn to the back of my work, and then scoop back through, and that's another double crochet made. So again, the hook's going from front to back through the ring. I'm making the yarn over and then drawing the hook back through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook. Then yarn over, but make sure that that yarn goes to the back of your work, and then turn the hook downwards and scoop back through. So we now have 6 double crochets in our ring. So what I'm going to do now is just hold the double crochet stitches gently with one hand and the ring with the other, and just pull them. And this just opens up the ring and gives you a bigger working area, so you can see more clearly where you've got to work into. And I've got to make 5 more double crochets now before I've finished this round. So I'm going to take my hook through, yarn over the hook, pull it back through to the front with 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook and turn my hook downwards and draw back through. So I've now made 8 double crochet. So for my next one, I'm going to take the hook from front to back through the ring, yarn over the hook, bring the hook back through. I have 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook to the back of my work, and then turn that hook downwards and scoop back through, and that's 9. Now I'm just going to do that little motion once more of holding the stitches in one hand and the chain in the other, and just opening them up slightly, just so that I've got a nice space where I can see where I can work my last 2 double crochet. So I'm going to put my hook through the ring, yarn over the hook, bring the hook through to the front, yarn over the hook and to the back of the work, turn the hook down, draw it back through, and that's my 10th double crochet made. And now for my final double crochet, I'm just going to put the hook through, yarn over the hook, draw that hook back through to the front, so I have 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook and to the back of the work, and then turn my hook down and scoop back through. And that's your 11 stitches made. So we now just want to join the round together. So if we take a look on the outside edge of our crochet, we can see that we've got these V shapes, and each V represents 1 stitch. So I'm just going to count back, not including the stitch that's on my hook. So I'm going to count back from the stitch underneath the hook. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I know that this stitch is the first stitch of the round, and that's where I'm going to join into. So I'm going to make a slip stitch here, and I'm going to go through both sides of the V, like that. You can see I've got the 2 stitches there, and then I'm going to put the yarn over the hook and draw it through both all in one motion. And that has connected it, and that is our first round complete. So now I can just snip my ends. I want to leave about 7 to 10 centimeters so that I've got enough so that I can darn in afterwards. And I'm just going to put the yarn around the hook once and then pull it through and flick it off. And there we can see this is pretty identical to the one that I showed you at the beginning. So now we're moving on to the petals. We're going to be working through both sides of each stitch. So if you can see here, there's the V and I'm opening up. So we're going to be working in each of these V's all the way around. So we're going to join in our new colour. So I'm going to take my crochet hook and pop it through both sides of any of the V's. And then I'm going to get my new colour and just drop it in the hook and pull the hook back through to the front, bringing the yarn with me. And I like to have about 10 centimeters of yarn just hanging down at the back as a tail end, so I know I've got enough to just darn in afterwards. So I'm going to make one chain just to secure it, and I'm going to make 1 double crochet in the same stitch. If I just pull the tail end gently, it just tightens up that stitch as well I've just made. So I'm going to make 1 double crochet in exactly the same spot where I made that chain, where that pink chain is. So I'm going to put the hook through both sides of the stitch. The yarn is that yarn over movement, which is up the back, over the top and down the front and to the back of my work. And again, it will sort of flop, but that's something that you'll just get used to. And then we just pull the hook back through to the front, drawing the yarn with us, and we've got our 2 stitches on our hook. So now we're going to take the yarn over the hook again to the back of the work, and then turn our hook down and draw it through, and we've made 1 double crochet now in our first round. So now we're going to make 5 chain. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to go to the next stitch where there's the V, and I'm going to go through both sides of the V and make a double crochet. Make sure your yarn is at the back of your work. That's the important thing to remember. And then you make that yarn over movement where the yarn sort of flops over the hook. Draw the hook back through to the front, and we've got 2 stitches on our hook. Yarn over the hook and to the back of your work. Turn your hook down and draw it back through. Now we're going to make 5 chain again. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to go to the next double crochet, the next V. So that's here. So I'm going to go through both sides of the V, keeping my yarn at the back of my work. Then the yarn goes over. It's that yarn over movement where it comes up the back, over the top and down the front, and it's flopped into position, and I catch the yarn in the hook and scoop it back through, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook. So then it's yarn over the hook again and to the back of my work, turn my hook down and scoop back through. So now I've made 2 petals. So now I'm going to make my next petal. So I'm going to make 5 chain. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to look at my next stitch, which is the next V around the edge, and I'm going to keep my yarn to the back, put my hook through from front to back through both sides of that V, and then yarn over the hook, draw the hook back through to the front, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook, yarn over the hook, turn my hook down and draw it back through. So if we have a look, we're now making this little series of petals going around the edge. So I'm going to make one more and then I'll continue round till I get to the end. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chain. Move to the next V, the next stitch. I'm going through both sides of the V, making sure that my yarn is at the back of my work. And then the yarn comes over the hook in that yarn over movement. I then draw the hook back through to the front. I have 2 stitches on my hook. I now take my yarn up the back over the top and down the front, making a yarn over again and to the back of my work. I can now turn my hook downwards and scoop it back through. So I'm going to continue this all the way till I get to the end. So I've just made my last double crochet in the final stitch of the round, but if I just join it now, it will be a little bit lumpy. So I'm going to make one more set of 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a final petal, and then I'm going to join it with a slip stitch to the first double crochet we made in the round. So I go from front to back through both sides of the V, and then yarn around the hook and I draw it through everything all in one stage, and then I can just cut my yarn and pop my yarn up and over and down the front of the hook for one final yarn over, and then draw my hook through and flick it off. And there it is, our little flower made. So I'm just going to finish it off and darn the ends in. So just so that you can see exactly how I do it, I'm taking the ends of my yarn. So this is the tail end from when we started, and I'm just going to run that round the back of the flower, just through the backs of the stitches. Now, if you were stitching this onto something, you could use these threads as a way of attaching your flower. And then I'm going to take the tail end of the pink thread that I brought through, and I'm just going to do a little over stitch on that one. Okay, and then pop my needle through, and then I'm just going to take that through the back of the flower. And snip the edge off that. And then again with my green thread, I'm just running it through the very back so that it's not seen at the front. And then I've just got my last end here from where I finished off my petals. So I'm going to thread a needle through the yarn there, and then I'm just going to feed that pink thread back down to the center. And draw that through the back as well. Fasten off. And hey presto, our flower is complete. So in this project, you've made a chain, joined it with a slip stitch, you've learned to make the double crochet stitch, and you've practiced your chains. So the next video in this series will be working along a straight edge, and it's a piece of bunting that goes with the flower, and you'll be working the treble stitch and chains. So for now, thanks for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you soon.